I'm going to pause it until we get people. Shall we begin?
Let's do this. All right. I'm going to introduce you. Hi, everyone. By the way, Jackie Hermes from Accelity. We are so excited to host this webinar today. I encourage my team to join us because I think there's going to be a ton of value. And I asked Rajiv here to send me his bio so I could introduce him. And he is a very accomplished man. So I'm not going to read the entire thing, but some highlights here is that he is the founder of Startup Hypeman, which helps growing companies not suck at telling their story, which is what we're talking about today. He was also named an agent of change by Huffington Post. He's given a TED Talk, been featured in Inc. and Forbes, and appeared on NBC Sports. He's also, well, I recently followed you on Instagram and I see all your yoga posts. So you are a yoga instructor, hip hop artist, and host of Startup Hypeman, the podcast. That was a mouthful. You are a man of many talents and I love it. And I'm going to hand it over to you.
Appreciate it. And we actually, if everyone's not aware, we just had Jackie as a guest on the show a couple of weeks ago. So go ahead and check out that episode. It was great. It was actually on, the topic was pretty interesting. It was about how do you manage turnover during a growth phase, which Accelity as a company has been going through, and they've had those things come up. So it was really great to hear your perspective on that, Jackie, and how you're making it through all of that.
Yeah, we're working on it. And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So a big shout out to Accelity for hosting this today. This is sales presentations that don't suck. Why don't we go ahead and dive right in? And thank you everybody for tuning in today and for letting us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. We got a global audience, which is really cool. And just make sure, the only thing I would say is in the chat window there's an option right above where you type. It's a little blue bar. If you click on that, it says panelists or panelists and attendees. So make sure it's set to panelists and attendees. So that way the messages don't just go to us, to Jackie and I, but they go to everybody. So any conversation during this webinar, you want to use the chat window. If you've got a specific question that you want answered that you have during the course of today, go ahead and hit that Q&A button and ask it there. That way we won't lose it in the scroll of the chat feed and we'll know like in one place where it is. All right. So with that said, you know what I'm going to do? Actually, no, I'm fine. I'll stay. I was going to say I'll turn around to the other side of the house, but then I might accidentally like knock the camera over or something because it's kind of dark here. But I think you can survive with this, right? If it's a little bit darker setting for me, it makes it a little bit more like cozy and intimate. So let's go ahead and dive into our presentation for today. And it is sales presentations that don't suck. All right. So I want to just kick off with telling y'all about the opportunity of a lifetime that I had. It was several years ago. I was working at a digital SaaS product agency, and my team had an opportunity to pitch to a like major entertainment brand. And when I say major, what I mean is that if I were to tell you their name, you would have definitely heard of them before. They produce like some of the most popular TV shows in the United States. And I'm unfortunately not allowed to say who they are in a public setting, but if we were ever if we did a private call after this, I could tell you who they were or tell you what their name rhymes with. So anyways, it was just trust me when I say you've definitely like heard of them and you've seen this television show before. And so they were coming to us because they wanted to add this like digital loyalty program to their hit show. And I'll tell you, if we were to win this brand, it would have been the largest deal our company had ever pulled in. Like multiple years, 8 figures per year, like crazy big deal. And it would have been so big that I actually remember my manager telling me before, she was like, hey, if we win this, we're going to have to talk about restructuring your comp plan because the company is otherwise going to have to like go broke paying you. And you also wouldn't have to work for the rest of the year. So it was like that big of a deal. And we had spent a ton of time. It was actually an RFP for those of you who are familiar with the RFP process, right? So they had RFP'd it out. We were one of the final 3 companies that they had selected to come present to them. And so we spent dozens and dozens of hours coming up with like the perfect strategy. And we had meticulously crafted our pitch deck. We got input from like all the different departments on how we should, the opportunity we should present to them, the offer we should present to them. We made sure it was beautifully designed. And so then pitch day came around and 4 of us flew to their headquarters for a live pitch. And it was a pretty crazy scenario because I was literally sitting across the table from the executive producer of one of the most popular TV shows of all time. Like, this person's name shows up first in the credits at the end of the show. It's like, it was like that, like, crazy of a moment for me. And so it was really our chance to shine and impress this person and win this, annual $10 million plus deal. And I could feel like all that hard work about to pay off, like big time, big time. And we went ahead and we opened up our slide deck and we began. Now, what do you think happened here? We had our meeting, we pitched them. What do you think happened? I'm going to give you options 1, 2, or 3, and use the chat to let us know. Do you think 1, did they say, this is the best presentation I've ever seen? 2, did they hire us right there on the spot? Or more practically, did they say, this is really good? 3, this is really good. You've made it into our top 3 list, like our final, let's discuss the scope in more detail. Let me know in the chat what you think. Was it 1, did they say best presentation I've ever seen? 2, hired us on the spot. 3, this is really good. Let's discuss it in more detail. Got a bunch of people saying 3s. We got some 2s in there as well. A lot of 3s in here. Someone gave it a 1. This is the best presentation I've ever seen. All right, well, the correct answer that I'll tell you is actually, it was a trick question. The correct answer was none of the above. What actually happened was what I now call a sales deck fatality. If any of you are familiar with the video game Mortal Kombat, what you're seeing in this GIF here is kind of what it felt like after having presented to this team. It started off as excitement on both sides of the table, and then 1 hour later, the executive producer, it literally felt like he was like reaching into our chest, pulling our heart out and throwing it on the table, because he was just meticulously picking apart the presentation, our strategy, our supporting data, our projected impact. And it kind of felt like the business version of playing Mortal Kombat. Ooh, Ted Bender in the chat. I like that. A Sub-Zero presentation. Maybe I need to start using that phrase instead. It was very much a Sub-Zero presentation. And as we were pitching, we could feel our momentum fading as time passed, and their interest waning at the same time. And when he was giving us that feedback, we were just like getting our asses handed to us until finally it was as if this voice was like, finish him, and then they just were like, get out, that kind of thing. And he like murdered us with his words. And the meeting finally ended with a less senior member of their team walking us to the door saying, we'll be in touch. And we left that meeting with our heads down, and the ride back to the hotel was complete silence. And no one was willing to say, like, hey, we blew it out loud, but we all knew it in our heads. And 1 week later, I got an email from them saying, thanks, but no thanks. And when I thought back at the time, I was like, how could this have happened? We had, at absolute worst, we had equal technology compared to the other competitors who we knew we were bidding against. But to be honest, we actually did have way better technology than them. We had multiple examples of other companies who we had successfully built loyalty programs for. We were more experienced than anyone else in the game, and our proposed solution that we thought that we had come up with, we were like, hey, this is pretty damn good. And get this, we even made a custom made an animated video to explain how the program was going to work. We had all the bells and whistles. So what did we do wrong that it went downhill so quickly? Well, the answer is that it was our presentation. And our first 4 slides looked a little something like this. And I believe the presentation is just lagging here. Y'all able to see what we did wrong with a blank slide at this point? Yeah? Okay. So what we did was a presentation where the first 4 slides look something like this. We started off with, on the top left here, the classic NASCAR slide is kind of the name of it, where you put a bunch of logos on screen of all your clients that you've worked with, and you brag about how they're a part of your roster, and it looks like a NASCAR, like all these logos on a NASCAR driving around the racetrack. From there, we then went into what I call the proven solution slide, where we explained the overview of our product suite, and we used all the catchy buzzwords like holistic and data-driven and omni-channel and patented and customer-centric and all those things. And from there, we went into what I call our tech stack slide, where we're like, hey, we got all this great software, and it's backed by the best uptime, 99.9% uptime, the API integrations, you name it. And then we got to what I call the suits slide, where we lined up the headshots of our executive leadership team and we explained how combined they had like 400 years of experience in the game. And then from there, we added a little bit more detail about ourselves over the next few slides. I think we had a slide that showed a photo of our headquarters with the bullet points of our other locations around the country. And then we finally got into our strategy that we had built for them and explained it from there. And this format was really our downfall. And I know it kind of sounds like a little bit ridiculous when you look at it, but the reality is most presentations actually look and feel and sound like this. And that's a problem because that format is a total snooze fest. It doesn't at all show the buyer that you care about them. It shows that you care about yourself. And the chances are it looks and sounds the same as what a lot of your competitors are doing, which honestly means like by slide 3, the buyer is looking for ways to be distracted. They're looking for other things to do. They're looking for ways to not pay attention. I heard someone say this once, and I wish I could remember who because I want to give them credit. So I'm not taking credit for this. I just remember who said it. But they said, it's funny that we build things in PowerPoint because most presentations aren't powerful and they have no point. And we got to change that, right? So when I think back to what happened there, that kind of set me off on this course of like understanding how to do this better. And it really put me on this journey of learning how to present, learning how to tell stories better, and ultimately figuring out the right mode of a pitch deck, specifically in a customer-facing sales presentation. And through all of my research across books, across business stuff, across entertainment, I found my inspiration and my sort of like resource in the most unlikely of places. And I'm telling you, if I had a do-over, I would have done this. I would have modeled my entire presentation on the Hamilton musical. Yes, you heard me right. I would have modeled my entire presentation off of the Hamilton musical. And my advice to you is to do the same. And I'm going to come back to what I mean by that later on in this webinar today. And, unfortunately, Hamilton wasn't out at the time that I was doing this. But if it was, I would have been like, oh, that's the thing. So after that sales deck fatality that I had, I vowed to never let that happen again. I told myself I am never going to create another presentation that sucks. And I've spent a lot of my life's work making sure that that's not the case ever since then. Now, quick introduction or reintroduction. What's up, everybody? My name is Raj Nathan, aka Raj Nation. This is all sales presentations that don't suck. And I just want to let you know that what I'm about to present to you all comes from this core belief that I have in the power of having a voice. I believe everyone deserves a voice, and I believe everyone deserves to express themselves. And the best way we can do that is by telling stories that connect with the people that we're trying to connect with. And when I look at this idea of voice, my life's work, my life's passions are all manifestations of this idea of voice. As Jackie mentioned in the introduction, I am a hip hop artist. I am a yoga instructor. I also, with Startup Hypeman, I have taken on announcing an MC work. And yes, this is a photo of me 2 weeks ago announcing the title fight, being the ring announcer for a title fight in an MMA match. And I'm doing more of that work as well. And all of these things influence what I do in the business arena with Startup Hypeman, where I like to call myself the chief pitch artist. Okay, I want you to just understand that that's my background because I don't just look at things through a business lens. I look at it through an overall communication lens. And I look at what are the things that can get a crowd going? What are the things that can get the audience on your side? And for the last 6 years, I've been bringing this hybrid background of entertainment, marketing, sales, branding, and blending business with entertainment to help build and deliver presentations that stand out to audiences and stand apart from competitors. And so with that background, that's what the influence is behind the content we're going to absorb today. And what we're covering today, just from like a bullet point list, you can see it here. We're going to just first talk through why presentations and when to use one. We're going to cover the mindset of thinking like an entertainer. We're going to talk about how do we go ham with the Hamilton presentation method and then things you can do today. And I've also got a bonus for you at the end. And a couple of just things I want to call out here. I'm going to use the word presentation and deck interchangeably. They both mean the same thing. I'm also going to, I'm aware of nuance based on industry. and based on sales process and based on price of product, etc. So what I'm providing you today is like the philosophy and the advanced strategies for most B2B selling environments. I'll do my best to speak to potential situational nuance where appropriate. And the one thing I'll say too, as you ask questions, again, use the Q&A button to ask questions. But I always say when I do these trainings, do your best to ask a question that is valuable for everyone. So what I mean by that is there's always that person who's like, so what would you do if you were in a situation where you were pitching the IT manager of a company that's 25 to 52 employees large, and they specifically work on the Northwest coast of the United States with an annual budget of $1 million? What would you do in that situation, right? Like, there's inevitably always that one person who's trying to get that, like, hey, in this very specific scenario that only works for me, what would you do? Which, like, I can't answer that because I don't know. I don't talk to that market. And that's like a ridiculous question. But also, that answer doesn't help everyone else. So try to ask questions that help the entire audience here today. And I'm pretty excited. We got 55 people who are tuning in live right now. That's great. So let's dive into this. I want to make sure we're good to move forward. So talking about why a presentation. If you all feel good with that, just put in the chat, capital letter WHY. Put the word Y in the chat if you feel good about moving into the meat of why we should be talking about this stuff and moving forward. Ben Brooks giving me that Y. Sarah with the Y. Nikki with the Y. All right. Got a lot of Y's up in here. Let's go ahead and talk about this. Why a presentation? Okay. You might be asking yourself, why do I even need to use one? Maybe you've asked yourself this before. Perhaps you've been able to get by without using one. Customers rarely, if ever, demand a presentation from you. So, like, why is it that you actually need one? The honest answer I'll give you is you don't, unless you want to win more deals. And I say that because in most cases, it is possible to capture a certain portion of your market without any type of deck. And I'll also say, listen, if you sell a product that's like $50 credit card online where the transaction cost is so low, you don't want to muddy things, but like you probably got a quick funnel of like garner interest, send some automated thing, and then get them to buy online without ever talking to a human being. If that's the case, like, don't muddy the waters by adding in a manual sales presentation into the process. But for things like if you sell something that involves like strategic decision making, that's when you really want to use a sales deck. And this is where you can capture more of your market and get higher dollar deals by using the right presentation. And I say that because every business has three types of customers. Okay. The first customer group is what I call the I already get it group. Okay. These are the buyers who require like little to no explanation. They've already done their research. They know exactly what they want, and they pretty much just need an order fulfilled. And so all you got to do is just kind of like not screw up with them and just tell them what they want to hear, give them their answers, and they're ready to buy, right? The advanced buying state is group one. The third group, I'll say, or I guess maybe the second group, but I'm putting it on the right side, is what I call the I've been burned group. And these are the customers who maybe they signed up with one of your competitors, they had a terrible experience, but they still know that they need this product or service in some way. So they come to you with a bad taste in your mouth, and they're pretty much just waiting for you to say, hey, we're not going to screw you over, and we have a good enough product that's going to help you, right? Both of these groups are oftentimes ready to buy almost right away. And then there's this third group, and that's what I call the guide me group. And for most B2B companies, they are going to represent your largest customer base, largest in volume as well as deal size. Because the guide me group is out there gathering information and thinking about doing something, but they are confused. They have questions and they need someone to guide them through the process. Okay. The guide me group is so incredibly valuable because this is where you can get higher dollar deals. And again, the quantity of customers is biggest here. And this, like today's content is mostly focused on winning the guide me group, but I will tell you, even like you can even get more out of the I already get it and the I've been burned group with the right presentation. And I'll tell you why the guide me group so specifically needs a good presentation, because product alone, I truly believe, no longer sells. Product on its own. unless you want to be commoditized, right? Unless you want to be bought on lowest price no matter what, product alone is not going to sell. Story is what sells. Because with groups 1 and 3, as I mentioned, they already know exactly what they want or they've been burned. And with those groups, oftentimes you have no wiggle room with them, right? They're ready and they're eager to buy. And we let our sales habits go out the window, and we let urgency of the deal take precedence over everything else. And they'll be like, yes, I'm ready to buy, but guess what? I don't want to pay a cent more than $15,000 or whatever, right? And let's say you charge $25,000, something like that. They're so in a buying state and ready to go and sign today, basically, that we're just going to be like, okay, sure, fine, do it. Yeah. We can make that discount, no problem. Right. And the I've been burned group is like, well, we've had this bad experience, so like we're really not looking to pay more. And you're like, okay, well, you're ready to buy, so yeah, sure, we can do that discount. Right. Groups 1 and 3, like the I've been burned and the guide me group, or excuse me, the I already get it group, they're going to be out there commoditizing you down. But with the guide me group, you're honestly giving away money if they commoditize you. And they will if you try to win solely on how great your product or service is. And it's an ultra competitive landscape. And you're not only fighting commoditization, but you're fighting the other providers in the market. You're also fighting the buyer's desire to actually do nothing and opt for status quo instead. So to win this guide me group and to stand out to them and stand apart from everyone else, story is what's going to sell. And a presentation is so crucial as well because it is the linchpin in your company's overall story stack. So just so you're aware, and like if this concept is new to you, think of your tech stack and now apply that concept to messaging, right? So this is what I do with companies is we'll build out the presentation, but we'll make it part of their overall story stack, which are the different layers of messaging from top to bottom. I think a good way to visualize it is like what you see in this cassette here. These are the different tracks on your company's mixtape, if you will. And then you pop it into that boombox and the sound, your company's sound plays loud and proud. Presentations and the ensuing story stack is how you craft a scalable narrative, one that grows with the company, one that can be, you can add new employees in and they can be schooled up real quick. So scalable narrative is done through the story stack, and the sales deck is like your single. It's the hallmark song on the mixtape. So now let's talk about when do you use a sales presentation? Let's talk about timing if you're going to use one. To understand that, we got to first understand the purpose of a sales presentation. And this is where I see most sellers and marketers like botch what the purpose of using a deck is. So I'm going to ask you in the chat here, what do you believe is the purpose of a presentation? What's your answer to this? Like why deliver a presentation to a customer? What's the purpose of it? Go ahead and put your responses in the chat. The purpose of a sales presentation. What do we think it is? Provide value through storytelling, inform on product features and benefits, guide you, keep you on track, reminders, provide information. They have no idea who you are, how you can help them, benefits, keep sellers consistent. I think these are all like circling the runway, if you think of like an airplane, but to land this plane, really, and someone else said capabilities, and that's actually what I would say is where a lot of companies go wrong is they have a capabilities deck that is just like, hey, we do this product and this product and this product. I hate the concept of a capabilities deck. So really what the answer to this is your purpose, your goal is simply to gauge their level of emotional buy-in so that you can qualify or disqualify them for the next stage of the process. And really that's all. And I tell you, when you reorient around this purpose, it will change the demeanor of you if you're the one selling, or your reps if you're leading a team. And it's going to change the type of information you choose to share, which is ultimately going to change your outcomes. And I'm very intentional about saying gauge their level of emotional buy-in to qualify or disqualify, as opposed to saying convince them we're great or persuade them. Because if you approach it from the perspective of gauge their level of buy-in, it's going to allow us to build presentations that naturally filter in the most qualified buyers and weed out unqualified buyers as early as possible. If our goal is just to convince them we have the best solution, we're going to build a capabilities deck then. We're going to do that traditional slide 1, our customers, slide 2, our product, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to create a presentation that turns them away. So knowing the purpose of a sales presentation, let's talk about timing now. there are really three distinct stages for sales decks. Generally speaking, every sales process starts with discovery, then moves into a demo or a strategy call of some kind, and finally advances to a proposal if all goes well. Depending on exactly what exactly you're selling, maybe this gets changed slightly, but let's agree that this is kind of a standard sales process. Um, these are three different stages where you can leverage a presentation. You don't have to leverage them in all three. I'm saying these are three different stages where you can choose to leverage a presentation. And just so you know, the further you get down that funnel, the more that level of buy-in that you're looking to secure increases. So at the discovery stage, you're getting a buy-in to the demo or the strategy. At the demo stage, you're trying to get that buy-in to the proposal. And at the proposal stage, you're trying to get the buy-in to the ultimate contract that they sign. And so what that means is that, a lot of people will ask me, like, how much should I customize it based on who the customer is? And my answer to that is it depends on the stage at which you're using a presentation, okay? So basically, like, the amount of effort and the amount of time you're spending pitching and the amount of customization is going to scale appropriately with what level of the funnel are you in. So if it's discovery stage, you really can't customize at all. If you're at the proposal stage, and here's what I'll tell you I recommend to my customers. When you've got a highly strategic account you're trying to win, your proposal should actually be its own custom presentation built exclusively for them. And that's going to help push things across the finish line. And in many cases, get them to purchase additional scope from you they weren't originally considering. But at the discovery and the discovery stage, can't do much customization. Demo call, I would even say then, like, you don't need to bother with much customization either, other than like if you want to put like their logo on the slide, or maybe like choose to swap out the industry that you're showing, like case studies, etc. And so that's our timing, right? So these are the different stages that you can use a presentation, and then how it kind of plays into the level of time spent and effort and customization you're going to put into the deck. So knowing that that's kind of when we can use one, let's talk about like the mindset we need to build a proper deck. And what I want you to do when you think about the mindset to have here, I want every single one of you to stop thinking like a business person. If you're a founder, stop thinking like an entrepreneur. If you're on the leadership team, stop thinking like an executive. And if you are an account executive or a BDR, stop thinking like a salesperson. Instead, I want you to think like an entertainer. Why do I say think like an entertainer? Because the entertainer has one goal in mind, and that is make an emotional connection with my audience. Get them to feel something. Get them buzzing about certain energy as they leave the arena. So what doesn't happen when you go to a concert? Think of your favorite artist. When you go and see them live, they don't hit the stage saying, "All right, how's everyone doing tonight? Yeah, we're doing great. Okay, awesome. So check it out. So tonight, we're going to do every song that we've ever produced in our entire catalog across all 9 albums. And it's like, 14 tracks per album. We're not just going to do every song from our catalog. We've also got some like rough drafts we've been working on in the garage and some B-sides. We want to make sure we cover those too. They're not really like complete yet, but it's all really important to us and we feel really good about it. We want to make sure you know about it. It's going to take about, a good 14 hours to get through it all. Who's with me? Right? Even those diehard fans can be like, what? Yo, get to the hits already. I want to get out of here in time. Right? They don't sit there and say, my product is what's important, aka my song. So I'm going to show you all of them. And what they do is they stick to a set list, right? They curate a set list because they say to themselves, what do we want people leaving, talking about, buzzing about? And then they build off of that set list. And that's why you want to think like an entertainer and nothing else, because the entertainer's mindset will get you to stop thinking business, and it will get you to instead keep in mind the audience above everything else. It will put the audience first. And when you think like an entertainer, then you'll be audience focused. And I would say, don't just think like an entertainer, but think like an entertainer and act like you're selling out Madison Square Garden. right? If you were put on stage to play in front of a sellout crowd, would you give them 20 slides about your back end technology? Hell no, right? You'd ask yourself, what can I say and what can I do to deliver an unforgettable experience and be focused on making it a great experience for them? Let's take a lesson from someone who has sold out Madison Square Garden, one of my favorite rappers of all time, Jay-Z, aka Bay-Z, Beyonce's husband. He had a song lyrics 18 years ago at this point, which is crazy to think, where he was comparing himself to a couple other less well-known underground rappers at the time by the names of Talib Kweli and Common Sense, also known as Common. And what Jay-Z says is, he goes, I dumbed down for my audience and doubled my dollars. If skills sold, truth be told, I'd probably be, lyrically, Talib Kweli. Truthfully, I want to rhyme like Common Sense, but I did 5 mil. I ain't been rhyming like common sense. And so what Jay-Z is saying here is, hey, if it were up to me, I have the talent to be the most lyrically dense, socially conscious rapper out there. And I could give you all of that. But I realized if I was really going to make it big, if I was really going to break through the mainstream, I had to meet my audience where they were. And hey, guess what? I did 5 million sales on a single album, and I haven't looked back since. And in the last couple of years, Jay-Z's become hip hop's first billionaire. Right. So think about what you're all trying to do here. You're all trying to make sure you break through into the mainstream of your customers' consideration set, the mainstream of like the industry zeitgeist. Right. So to break through to the mainstream, you got to meet your audience where they are. So ultimately, the lesson here is see and speak from your audience's point of view. So how do we do that, right? And how do we actually build a deck that's going to stand out and stand apart? Well, the way we're going to do that, as I mentioned before, is by going ham. We got to turn to that source of entertainment, the Hamilton musical. And I told you earlier, at the beginning, if I had a do-over, that's what I would have done. So let's talk about what that means. If you're not familiar with the Hamilton musical, actually, do a favor. Capital letter H or write the word ham if you have either seen the musical or if you've listened to the soundtrack, whether that was live or on Disney Plus or just listening to it on Spotify. A lot of people going ham up in here. I love it. I love it. Okay, great. For those of you who have not seen it or heard of it, have you been living under a rock the last five years or so? Quick synopsis, okay? It is like a hip hop musical that's gained like international recognition, like 1 million Tony and Grammy awards. And it's a play about the life and legacy of one of America's founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton. And if you dissect the way they tell this story, you have the perfect framework for a killer presentation. I'm going to spoil it for you, okay? Hamilton dies at the end. Big surprise, a guy who was alive 250 years ago is now dead. But Hamilton dies in a pistol duel with the then vice president, Aaron Burr, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. But let's look at really the structure of this play. Because if you were to break down, really think about it. If you were to just hear, hey, the vice president shot someone today. If Kamala Harris shot someone in a pistol duel today, you'll be like, what? You'd be like, what's going on with our society? So that's a pretty interesting thing to throw out there and just have people accept as the ending. So in order to get there were a few things they did really, really well. And if you look at it, people don't leave the play saying, oh my God, how could the vice president murder someone? Instead, they leave talking about the life and the legacy of Hamilton. And that's what people know the play for. They don't know it for a pistol, for Burr shooting Hamilton. They know it for the fact of wow, I didn't realize Hamilton was so amazing and had all these was so influential to our country's creation, right? So how do you get people from being today, if you heard that the vice president shot someone, you'd be like, well, they should be in prison and our society's all going to hell. Ted Bender, make vice presidents duel again. I like that. So how do you get people to agree with that? Well, it's all about how they constructed it. Starting with the introduction, Hamilton's intro gives away the ending. And what they do is the curtains open, okay? And the first lines of the entire play, let me get my Spotify queued up here for y'all. The first lines of the entire play.
How does a bastard, orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean, by providence impoverished and squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar.
I know y'all were snapping on your side too. It wasn't just me. So let's take a look at that, right? Right out of the gate, the first lyrics of the entire play, they say, how does a bastard orphan, son of a whore and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean, by providence, impoverished and squalor, grew up to be a hero and a scholar. So the first thing they do is they say, hey, how is it even possible for someone to have every single odd stacked against them and still go on to be an American hero? And they convey the point that for the next 3.5 hours, we're going to prove to you it is possible, and that's why you're here today. And then one of the final lyrics of that opening song is Aaron Burr shouting, I'm the damn fool that shot him. So right away, they give away the ending. But the thing is, now you're hooked because you're dying to know, how did it all happen, right? And so now that you're hooked, you're willing to listen. You don't say, oh, well, I know the ending. I just saved myself 3 hours. Let's get home. We'll beat traffic. No, you're like, okay, I got to see how this is going to unfold, right? And so then from there, the play is structured very intentionally, where there are 3 duels. So tension builds between Burr and Hamilton over the course of the play, but then they very specifically have 3 duels within there. Remember, they told us at the beginning, like Burr says, I shot him. But in order to get us to that endpoint where we buy into the life and legacy of Hamilton, as opposed to obsessing over a murder, they have 3 duels in place. And the first duel is called the 10 Duel Commandments. And what they do through this song is they explain the concept of dueling culture in 1700s America. They explain how it was a thing then. They explain the ground rules of it. They explained how it came together and why you would fight for your honor, all that kind of stuff. What they do is they effectively define that world for us and get us to buy into the way the world worked, the way the world works in the context of the play. And so when we buy into that, now we feel good about moving forward. And again, this was an intentional design with the play, because the creator said this: the audience needed to understand what dueling was like back then. This wasn't drive-bys. This wasn't heated people taking their guns outside of bars. This wasn't beef the same way beef is today. It was super codified. There was a ritual about it. It was like legal arbitration with guns, right? So they purposely put that first duel in there to get us to buy into the world as we know it, right? Get us to escape our current world and say, okay, yes, you're right. That is how the world works. Which then leads us to later on, there's a second duel where a character you are emotionally invested in dies in a duel from getting shot. So what it does is it shows you the impact, it shows you the significance, and it shows you that, hey, there's like some real terms. Even though it's normalized, there is a real impact when duels go down. And there's tears in the crowd from the audience at this point as they realize what's happened. But we get that like emotional buy-in to the impact of a duel. And what does that do? It perfectly tees up the third and final duel. The tension continues to boil over ultimately between Burr and Hamilton, and we get to this final pistol duel. So by now, we understand how dueling operates, and we've already felt the emotional impact. Because the story is told so well, and they gave us the ending at the beginning, the emotional buy-in now isn't a stretch whatsoever. In fact, instead, we anticipate it as an inevitable ending to the play. Burr and Hamilton face off, Hamilton gets shot, and we're left reflecting on the life and the legacy of Alexander Hamilton, not crying bloody murder, which is exactly what they wanted. Because what do? We leave the theater. We say, wow, I can't believe Hamilton was so influential. And what did they do in the opening lines? They say, hey, how did someone who came from nothing build a great American legacy and become an American hero? And we leave the theater saying, wow, what an American hero, right? That's exactly what they were going for. And you have to look at how this was constructed to say, hey, I can really model off of that, because also very intentionally, they said every single element in the show at every moment was serving the story. The story was not a list of events on a historical timeline. It was the emotional journey that Hamilton and the other key characters needed to make. And I really want you to take that to heart as you think about building your own presentations. Every single element of that presentation should serve the story. It should not serve the product. It should not serve your company, so to speak. It should serve the story that your audience needs to hear in order to buy into wanting to work with you. So that's the overall format. And now I want to talk through real quick, how do you do this at a tactical level, building slides for your company? Are we ready for that? Give me a capital letter S if we're ready to talk about how we put this into slides. Nikki says S, James, Cynthia, Jackie, Hutch, Sarah. All right. Troy is ready. Nelson's ready. All right. So let's talk about this, right? How do we, I told you if I had that do over and if I could avoid the sales deck fatality again, I'd follow that model. So now let's talk about how do you avoid getting killed yourself and instead build a killer presentation that's going to win over your customers. So the way we do that is by co-opting the Hamilton presentation method. Or that's what I call it, right? The Hamilton presentation method. Intro and 3 duels of your presentation, okay? So each duel represents a different section of your presentation. And with each section, you're trying to answer specific questions. So in total, as I go through this, there are 10 fundamental questions that your deck is supposed to answer. I'm not saying, I want to call this out up front. I am not saying this means you must have a 10-slide presentation. To be honest, most of the presentations I develop are somewhere between 15 and 25 slides. I'm not telling you by answering these 10 questions upcoming, you have to have only 10 slides. I'm just saying through however many slides it takes, you got to answer these questions in your presentation. So we start with the introduction. What you're going to do is give away the ending, quote unquote, and tell them the destination. Tell your customer, answer the question, what is the destination for your customer? Just like Hamilton opens by giving away the ending, you're going to do the same. Show them the end game that they are striving to get to, right? What does a better life look like for them? You might think this will work against you because you're trying to build up towards that. But I really like to think of it as like going to Disney World, okay? Think about when you were a kid and your parents said, get in the car, we're going to Disney World. And you and your siblings were like, yeah, right on, we're going to Disney World. Now, imagine if they said, okay, kids, get in the car. We're driving for 21 straight hours and we're not telling you where we're going. You'd be like, no, and you'd be kicking and screaming the entire way. You do not want your customers to be internally kicking and screaming, right? You don't want to be like, we got 21 slides and I'm not telling you where we're going with this. So give them the ending up front. Give them that emotional finish at the beginning. Say, what we're really trying to accomplish here is we want to get you to a place where you're not having to worry about dealing with these tech issues anymore. And it'll free up your time to do this and this and this, right? That's a hypothetical, but I think you get the point here. So give them Disney World up front. First thing you got to do is answer, what's the destination for your customer? Then we get into our first duel. And the questions here. What does their world today look like? What market forces are changing the world and causing what problems? And why is change necessary? The key with this duel, these 3 questions, is that you're gaining alignment on some basic truth before telling them there's a reason to change. And this is key because it forces them to either agree or disagree with you. And almost always they are going to agree with you if you present it well. And if they agree with you on the way the world works today, now you've got your first layer of emotional buy-in. And now they're going to be more likely to visualize towards the destination you've laid out. It also helps put them in a position to feel like it's their presentation and not yours. If you can get them to be like, yeah, I do agree with the way the world is working today. So what you're trying to do here is map out for them what's going on in the world relative to what they would care about. And I always say, if you really want to do this the best way possible, create an analogous scenario to whatever their business case is. Create an analogous scenario to where you can then be like, well, all of that you've just agreed to, that's the way the world is working over here, is actually what's happening. It's the exact same thing that's happening in your industry. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of it like that before. These people are smart. I really need to keep listening to what they're saying. That's what's going to go on in their head. So if you can create the analogy up front, that that analogy can drive like everything else in such a cleaner way than any other explanation of your product. And what I'll say here as well is you're talking up the world, you're talking up the idea of change, but you're not talking up your product yet. Okay. That's going to set up your second duel, which is what crossroads does that present? So you talk about why change is necessary, which then lets you say, okay, what crossroads does that put in front of them? What are the trade-offs or loss of doing nothing? And what's the impact of making a change? Okay. So now what you've done is put an inflection point in front of them. You've said, well, hey, here's what you can do. You can either go this way or you can go this way. Which way do you want to go? And I'll tell you, with all of my clients, this is the slide they are most hesitant to implement because they're like, why would I give them the option of saying they don't want to go my route? And what you're doing is you're empowering them. You're empowering them to tell you what they want. People will feel good if you empower them. You're also getting them, you're securing what I call a micro agreement. You're getting them to say, literally say, yes, this is the path we want to explore. Okay? And then once you do that, you have that would you rather slide. Think of it like the Matrix, like with Neo, taking the red pill or the blue pill, right? So you want to say, hey, which pill do you want to take here? And now with that, they're going to answer 99% of the time. They're going to answer probably 99.999% of the time. They're going to answer yes, whatever, the path you've laid out for us that is good. We want to go that way. What you're going to still do is so the trade-offs are lost if they took the other pill, right? If they did nothing or if they went back to their old ways. So this is where you're like, okay, hey, I'm glad we agree on that. Let's just, reset expectations for a moment. Let's say you come out of this and you don't feel like you feel great today, but a week later, you're like, yeah, you know what? Actually, we're fine the way we are. Here's the here's the impact that's going to have. Here are the trade-offs that you're going to have to deal with. This and this and this and this, which is why I'm glad you said you want to go in the direction that we're presenting, because it's going to have some real positive benefits to it. And that's where you're like, you present the impact of doing the right thing. I also want to point out, again, we are not yet talking about your product or your service or your company. We're just we're getting them to agree with, yes, this is the way of doing things. Because what that's going to do, it's going to allow you to introduce your company in your third duel as the inevitable ending. Because the questions you're going to answer here are, what's your plan of attack? So like, what is your product or what is your service? And you're going to explain that. And then you're going to answer, what destination does that bring them to? So you're going to restate that destination, bring it back up, and then you're going to reinforce it with your credibility, your proof, your case studies, etc. Okay? This is the point at which you finally introduce your product or your service in your company. And then you reinforce why it makes sense, and you talk about other customers who have had success. And this is where you'll have, I think the best way you can do this is like quotes, or if you can put a video, if you can put a before and after on your slide of customers who you've worked with. I also want to mention something that most people don't think about when it comes to credibility. It is not only successful customer examples, but if you are further down in the sales funnel with them, say it's a proposal stage, credibility is also reminding them of the rapport you have built up to this point. So like if you're on a discovery call, you don't have any rapport yet, but if this is a proposal stage, dedicate an entire slide to reminding them all the things you've done to this point. Hey, we had a good first meeting. We met with the IT team. We confirmed their needs and expectations. We've talked through integrations, right? So put back in their head how far they've come with you. That's also part of your credibility. And then at this point, once you've gone through all of this, now you can start talking about pricing details. You can start talking about like the project scope. You can now go into your formal software demonstration if you're using this on a demo call. I think the best way you can tee up that traditional demo of software is with a deck. Because if they understand it conceptually, showing it to them is just going to be a reinforcement, and you're not going to have to actually sell anything at that point. There's no convincing. It's like, okay, yeah, I already agree with this. I just need to see how it works so I'm not crazy. Right? And that, my friends, is how you achieve flawless victory, going back to our Mortal Kombat nod. And I promise you, if you follow this advice, people are going to want to do business with you, not only because your product or service is good, but because on top of that, they recognize you as an expert and a thought leader in your field. And when that happens, the value of what you offer increases. And they're going to not be so nitpicky about not having one product feature or another. I know one of the biggest challenges the companies I work with is they've historically get caught in like feature battles with their competitors. This is going to happen far less if you tell the right story and have the right presentation, because they're going to say to themselves, wow, I learned something today. Nobody sees the market the way they do. We got to get on board their rocket ship because they're going to take us places, right? That's the level of like decision making they're going to have. And they'll be like, yeah, I know they're missing that one thing that other company had, but nobody sees the market the way these people do. And we want to be on board with the people who see the market in the way that we've never even thought about before, because they're going to help us more than any lack of product feature will. This is the outline that I wish I knew years ago when I was staring that $10 million annual deal in the face. And it's the outline that I now follow when I build presentations for all Startup Hypeman clients. And the results have been like pretty awesome, right? Just recently, we had someone in 3 straight months achieve 200%, 195%, and 105% of their quota. We've helped bring close rates as high as 1 in 3. We had someone recently do 145% of their Q1 quota. Right? We've had someone use this method. We built a presentation under this method, and it was a custom presentation for the biggest company in their industry in the country that they operate out of. And that ended with that's the CEO of that company saying, "You really understand our business. This was great." And they walked out with a letter of intent. Right? I'm not BSing you when I tell you this storytelling method works so well, and it's going to cut out those awful pricing negotiations. I mean, nothing's going to 100% cut out negotiations, but you'll have to deal with it a lot less. You'll increase the scope of your projects, and you'll have far less like ghosting happen in the sales process as well. And I want to just recall one thing. Don't get it twisted. I just want to bring up this slide again. Remember, so that's like the outline for your presentation. Just remember the amount of information you include or how long you spend on it and how customized it is going to depend on what stage you're using it in. Okay. I think you can get by with pretty much no customization on discovery or demo stage, except for maybe swapping out like using case studies that are relevant to them or their industry. And even then there's even a workaround with that we've used before that's been fine. But once you get to that proposal stage, for strategic accounts that are worth a lot of money, you are giving away money if you don't build a custom presentation for them. And then the last thing I'll say is, because nearly everyone overlooks this part, remember, especially, and this is specifically for like the proposal stage, once you've got a lot of rapport with them, make sure like you don't surprise them on pitch day, because that's what we did in that example I told you about up front where we blew it. Because what we should have done again, because we're trying to get their emotional buy-in. So what I should have done back then was involve them in the process. I should have sent them the first X number of slides and said, "Hey, are we on point with this? Does this seem on track to you?" And they would have been able to tell us, actually, no, right? Or if in a positive scenario, they would have been like, yeah, this does have a lot of the elements that we're thinking of. And because if you do that, then assuming when you deliver that proposal, it's a multi-stakeholder situation, whoever your main point of contact in, they're going to feel like they had input on the presentation. And therefore, they're going to feel it's as much their presentation as it is yours. So they're going to be more incentivized to champion your cause internally because it feels like it's their deal as much as it feels like it's your deal. Okay. So when you get to that proposal stage for a strategic account, like, if it's a regular account that's the same money you're doing with everyone else, you don't need to worry about it. But for ones where the dollar value could mean a lot for your company, or having them as a logo could mean a lot for your company, do a custom presentation and then let them know, hey, here's what I'm thinking in advance before you ever actually present it to them live. But even when they come to the table, they already feel like they're familiar with what's about to happen. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Hamilton presentation method and what I believe so strongly in and what I what I implement with every presentation that I build when it comes to sales decks. Final things I want to leave you with are just like parting shots. Okay, sales decks help you capture your largest customer base, and they are the linchpin in your story stack, which enables a scalable narrative. Most decks traditionally are dry, self-centered, and miss the point, which is why most customers say they don't like being presented to, because they're getting bad presentations. And then remember, think like an entertainer to build curiosity and sustain interest. I'm laughing at what's in the chat there, but I hope my competitors never see this webinar. And then use the Hamilton presentation method, right? The intro and the 3 duels. Finally, I have some bonuses for you. So I'll follow up with an email. I got to upload this to YouTube. Once I do, you'll get the recording. I recommend you follow this handle on Pinterest and Instagram. It's called @thegooddeck. That's actually who we use as our design partner for all of our presentations that we build for customers with Startup Hypeman. And what they do with the Good Deck at the Good Deck is she literally finds well-designed slides from around the internet, and she'll put them in a Pinterest page or an Instagram post, and she'll explain like why the mechanics of the design work well. If you're into podcasts, listen to Startup Hypeman, the podcast. As I mentioned before, we had Jackie as a guest earlier on. It's interviews with different people talking about growth strategies. I'm also going to send you in a follow-up email another bonus, and that's your sales deck story builder. So it takes this format, the intro and the 3 duels, and gives you boxes for you to sketch out or write out what would your answers be to those questions. So I'm going to send that to you. And then if you want to get in touch, here's my contact information. In the follow-up email, I'll put a booking link as well if you want to meet with me. But as you know, this is what I spend like 95% of my time doing when I'm not announcing MMA fights and I'm not teaching yoga or rapping. So if you want to work on your deck together, of course, I'm happy to have that conversation. But in any case, you'll get follow-up email, and please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm hyperactive there. I want to leave a little bit of time here. I know we're right at time, but if you have any questions, please just drop them now. You can do it in the chat or the Q&A. I'll stick around for a couple more minutes. If you've got to drop, no problem. I'll leave this Q&A portion on the recording so you can go back and look at that if you missed it. But if you have any questions right now, go ahead and ask them. And I'm happy to stick around for a couple minutes and answer them. And I do want to point out what Jackie just put in the chat here. We're doing another webinar together in a month on July 22nd, or July 22nd, I believe, where Jackie's going to come on. We're going to do this together, but Jackie's going to teach 5 marketing mistakes that most people make that you do not want to make. So make sure you sign up for that. And the link is in the chat right now. James is saying he's on board. I can see those used for white papers as well as sales decks. Yeah, you could definitely use this format for a white paper as well. So let me know if you have any questions. I'll hang on here for like 2 more minutes. Otherwise, if you feel comfortable, if you feel good, we'll talk another time then. You are welcome, Nikki. So this is fantastic. Thank you so much. Nelson, thank you. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, cool. Let's call it there. If you do have a question that comes to mind, just like ping me through email or LinkedIn later on. And I look forward to reconnecting with all of you. I'm glad that this did not suck for you, Michelle. Jackie, big shout out to you and Accelity for allowing me to do this for your crew. And yeah, I'm looking forward to next month when you're going to come back onto the Zoom stage and talk about marketing mistakes that people should not be making.
Me too. Thank you. This was awesome.
All right, friends. Have a good day. Make it a great week.